to the stage. Let me go ahead and bring up another PowerPoint for the new group. And let me introduce myself and Dr. Tony, who is the founder of the PI Doctors League community. Welcome, Dr. Tony, and welcome to your group. I just finished up our weekly webinar to our Zeus clients. Tony, if you're able to hear me, I'd like you to go ahead and maybe introduce us and get it started.
Frank, can you hear me there, buddy?
I sure can.
All right, we are here in St. Louis. We've got a treat today. Today is Thursday, 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. We have live webinar on a something that a lot of doctors have been looking for, is a PI software to add into our EHR programs. But let me introduce Dr. Frank Liberti. Over 35 years plus, probably by now, advising doctors and attorneys in the personal injury practice of evaluation. He's always been a keynote speaker everywhere he goes, and he conducts his own seminars throughout the United States and probably more in different countries, I'm sure. He's hosted many advice situations from many programs such as CNN, CBS, and he's also been featured in the Entrepreneur magazines on personal injury on his advice. So we've got a great person here with credibility. He has developed something that I was looking for over 30 years, is a personal injury software that plugs right into your EHR programs with your patients, which is great to have. If you're doing personal injury and on this PI community, I think we should look at this to add in just like a technique you use with a patient you would use. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Frank Liberti. He's just going to go over some great points of why this PI software is very valuable for a personal injury doctor as ourselves. And take a look at this. We're going to have a special courtesy offer he has given us for our community since we do PI. And like I said, if you do PI, maybe we should have a PI software for sure for this. So Frank, go ahead and take over, buddy. Thanks for being here, on taking your time out for our PI community. We are over 2,047 doctors of personal injury strong as of today. So we are rocking and rolling. Thanks, doctors, for sharing on our post. And I'm going to turn it over to Frank right now. Thanks, Frank.
You're welcome, Tony. Yes, you are rocking and rolling. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into the Zeus program then, because one of the things that we're trying to do is to give our doctors the core competence and let them be thought of completely differently. It's called repositioning. In the seminar I just finished, the webinar I just finished, it was about positional mapping, because there's a perception held by every attorney about you in your community and comparing you to others. The way that you know you are the brand is if the attorneys refer their family to you when they've been involved in accidents. So I want to show you how Zeus can put you at the top of your game. It is an electronic health record system, but it is strictly for personal injury. And the good news is you can keep your electronic record system now and use that on your Medicare patients, your cash patients, your insurance patients. And you only have to use the Zeus program actually on the initial and discharge visit. And I'm going to explain to you why. So there's really good news. Zeus is affordable. It is the most competent personal injury record system you'll ever find. It's got accolades from Westlaw, Nexus, Lexus, and I've licensed it to about 20 of the electronic health record companies who have recognized that Zeus has what their systems don't have, and here's the reason why. All medical record systems, electronic health and electronic medical record systems, are based on the Government Center for Medicare Service guidelines. So you're using E&M level examinations, evaluation and management level examinations, and they are meant for Medicare. They're meant for general health and disease, but they are not meant specifically for things like Social Security determinations, some workers' comp applications, and they're not meant for personal injury application. Personal injury requires a different set of guidelines than the Center for Medicare Service Guidelines. And the insurance companies have created systems. They now use softwares. Colossus was the first. There are 80 versions of Colossus. Every insurance company uses a version, and that version is there for one reason: to make determinations about bodily injury claims. They have another software that's named Mitchell Decision Point that looks at your fee schedule, looks at your medical necessity, looks at your documentation. They use these things to deny, to dispute, to discount your claim factors, and Zeus will prevent it. Zeus has built-in search and tag operations that will automatically correct any outpoints that you might have. We've built Mitchell Decision Point in it. If you're over-treating, Zeus will let you know. If you are not meeting the medical necessity for ordering of treatments or diagnostics, Zeus will let you know. Colossus can make 600 medical determinations and decisions, and we have built in a computer-aided decision support system where you click a button and Colossus and Zeus will match the 600 medical determinations and decisions that Colossus makes, and it will make these determinations for you automatically. For example, it will design the whole person impairment ratings for every one of your diagnoses. It will convert your diagnoses into an impairment, place it into the diagnostic related estimate category, assign a diagnostic based injury severity type and trauma line to each injury. It will even make diagnoses if you're uncertain about a diagnosis. If your patient suffers a mild traumatic brain injury after an auto accident, Zeus will determine by AMA guides whether it's a behavioral, emotional, somatic, physical, concussion, contusion, and it will list the different concussion. It will show the AMA guide, edition, chapter, table, page, and formula. It will put the injury into a table, and it will do it automatically so that the adjusters can no longer deny and dispute. For an adjuster to deny and dispute your findings, they would have to show that the AMA guides themselves are against the greater weight and manifestly unjust. So we're giving you power behind Zeus. Now, I'm going to get back to this one point, and then we're going to walk through Zeus. I said that I want to get you away from the E&M level, evaluation and management level exam, because those are not meant for personal injury. Personal injury requires the use of the injury model exam. The code is 1191M. If you look it up, in the government fee schedule, it pays twice as much as a 99204. But more importantly, it says 1191M is an impairment rating by attending physician, standard 1 to 3 body parts, done at MMI. There's another exam called 99455, which is the MMI exam. So there's no room for a 99204 evaluation and management exam in a personal injury claim. You could do a 99455 MMI exam, but I want you to do the highest level exam, which is the 1191M. And that's the impairment rating by attending physician, standard 1 to 3 body parts, done at MMI. Now, when it says standard 1 to 3 body parts, those body parts are musculoskeletal, psychiatric, and neurologic. We are not going to go above 3 systems. If you did that, it'd be a higher level, and our license doesn't allow us to get into that level. Those are life-threatening injuries and surgeries and so on. So this is the perfect exam for you. Zeus actually is based upon the injury model exam. It'll automatically walk you through it. Now, I want to show you how the insurance companies have created their system to be 80% different from our government Center for Medicare Service Guidelines. The health record companies that I licensed Zeus to have recognized that it was easier to license this than to attempt to reverse engineer it. It's so affordable, so easy to acquire, but it's going to empower you. I want to show you how and why. So we're going to go to screen share. Okay, take a look at the actual Zeus system. Here we go. On the main menu, we have a list of recorded webinars. These are outstanding tutorials. We're very heavily into clinical training in injuries such as those that constitute impairments. We have a webinar on AOMSI injuries. We have one on the uncinate process fracture. We have one on mild traumatic brain injuries. We have one on muscle fatty infiltrate. We have one on ganglion injury. We have them on at least 13 or 14 of the clinical injuries that occur in a low impact case. And we've got webinars on certain administration functions. We've got webinars on Zeus itself. We've got webinars on how to establish relationships with attorneys. So when you click on that, you'll see a list of all of our recorded webinars, and obviously you can play them at your leisure. Another thing is you will be invited to join our Zeus weekly webinars every week, and if you can't get to them, then you can watch them at your convenience. In fact, I want to start off by showing you one of the webinars. Now, I have an email I got from a doctor yesterday. He sent the 55-minute video to a local attorney. Yesterday, that attorney called me. He referred the video to 3 of his colleagues in the community. The doctor has received referrals from all 4 of those attorneys in one day after watching that video. That video is available for you to send to attorneys. I'm going to show you a little bit of a PowerPoint here so you get an idea of what we're trying to do in the community. We want to educate attorneys. This is a free PowerPoint that you'll be able to use to educate attorneys in your community. How to understand and overcome the obstacles of Colossus and the other claims handling softwares that every insurance company uses. There's Mitchell Decision Point, Injury IQ, ACE, and all the insurers have their own version, but they all work on the same guides I'm going to now reveal. So we want to eliminate low settlement valuation. We want to eliminate varying and contradictory opinions. We want to stop disputes, denials, discounts, and omissions of our claim factors. And we want to overcome unfair claims acts when the insurers and the adjusters engage them. So we've created Zeus to counter Colossus. We did beta testing for 6 years before we introduced it into the market, and it has been able to effectively prevent unfair low settlement valuation, especially in soft tissue claims, especially when adjusters argue and say that the speeds weren't enough to damage the vehicle, so it couldn't have injured occupants, or when they blame it on prior accidents or pre-existing conditions, or when injuries aren't visible to the naked eye, or property damage to the vehicle is low. We're able to overcome that. We can now establish the preponderance of the evidence, eliminate contradictory adjuster and IME opinions, disputes, denials, delays, omissions, and discounting of our findings. And we can save the attorneys up to 50% of their legal time and spend in producing a demand if they use our record systems. More on that in a minute. Now, it's no secret to plaintiff attorneys that the insurance companies use these softwares to engage cost containment measures. And they do that by having their own set of computer code language to limit bodily injury valuation. It's very difficult to oppose insurers if you don't have specific knowledge of how the system works. So I want to show you briefly that the claims settlement software is used by insurers. There's 80 versions, are based on adjusters inputting data referred to as decision points and value drivers. And then the Colossus will assemble a range of values for the claim's worth based upon the input of those decision points and value drivers. Here are those decision points. These exist in the personal injury system, but not in the Government Center for Medicare Service Guideline. So they're missing in your regular electronic health record, which is why Zeus is being made available to the PI Doctors Elite community as an add-on, and it's available on trial basis. So there's no commitments, and this will be used on the initial and the discharge visit. You can continue to use your EHR in every visit in between. More on that in a moment. Look at what you're up against. The decision points that the insurers use include over 14,000 value drivers, over 27,000 severity drivers, over 26,000 standard multipliers. There's 33 liability drivers. There are 15 additional increased multipliers. That totals 67,880 decision points, or value drivers, or severity drivers, or standard multipliers that are supposed to be in your medical file that could interface into Colossus. Then Colossus would then assemble, and they would take a value for the range of those decision points, and that's how they arrive at the valuation of the claim. It's not just decision points. They also have case maximizers, prolonged modifiers, injury severity types, and trauma lines. And if you don't know what they are, you're going to have a very difficult time interfacing and inputting value for them. You don't even stand a chance using a standard medical record because 80% of them are missing. Now listen to this important formula, because the decision points are converted to a valuation by dollar by the formula entitled the decision point to dollar translation percentage multiplier. In other words, every decision point is going to translate into a dollar based on the insurer's rate and formula, and they're all the same. So your first obstacle is that 80% of the decision points that could add value are missing in standard medical records and demand letters. So that's what you're up against. There's another obstacle. You've got to overcome unfair claims acts. There are 13 of them. They are engaged by insurers up to 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 or 9 times in every claim against you. What the adjusters will do is they will manipulate the trauma line. Now, if you don't know what the trauma lines are, you're not even including them. So you're going to lose the value for that. They will drag an injury severity point to a lesser value. For example, if you say that there's a bulging or herniated disc, but you don't use language that says the bulge or the hernia causes pressure on the thecal sac or spinal cord, they will drag the disc injury severity point down and rate it the same as 2 muscle spasm, losing so much money and value. Zeus will not allow you to put in a diagnosis, make an entry that is missing the language that's required by Zeus to input value. The next thing insurers do is they will reduce the severity of a trauma line and an injury severity point so it's non-rateable and it carries no value. Another thing they'll do is benchmark tuning bias, where they can just tune their software to dial down claims arbitrarily. They will take a zip code and use a scatter graph and plot the lowest value paid per zip code. And when you make a claim in that zip code, they will not pay beyond that lowest value given in the last 12 months. It's called benchmark tuning bias. There's others: core claim process redesign, second guessing medical opinion, and 7 others. Zeus will automatically counter these unfair claims acts for you. So if you have the standard medical record system and you're using a narrative, you're not going to prevent or counter unfair claims acts. You're not going to exchange sufficient decision point data into a Colossus claim. You're not going to prevent disputes and denials. You're not going to add value. And unfortunately, here's another obstacle, and we covered this. There's a difference between document guidelines and record systems based on government guides and based on insurer guides. Zeus is your insurer guideline system. So it's a wonderful high technology add-on to allow you to interface and input extra value and prevent yourself from being denied, disputed, and cut. So Zeus is both a medical and a legal record system. Now, it's going to search and tag for the medical decision points, of which 80% are missing, but it's also going to allow the attorneys to use Zeus to create their demand. Now, attorney Stephen Barris tells us that the medical data is now referred to as a triggering factor, no longer a SOAP note. And the only place the adjuster is permitted to acquire data about an injury claim is in the body of your medical records, not a narrative. He says if it's not in the medical records, it doesn't count. Stupid rule, but apparently that's how it's done. And Colossus expert and attorney Aaron DeShaw says, while the legal profession has historically used narrative styles to convey claim, much of the information provided in either a medical or narrative has no value in Colossus. They say adjusters are going to look almost 100% to the decision points contained in the medical records, now referred to as triggering factors for the information. It says only a minority of lawyers and doctors have a clue what's going on, and attorneys need to convey data about the claim in a table format. Here's the last thing I want to show you, that you're not going to get it in an electronic health system. If you'll see this, this is a picture, a screenshot of the software producing a table. The diagnoses must convert into an impairment. The impairment must be listed as to what body part it affects. Then you have to list the impairment, what guide you discovered it from, what chapter in that guide, what table in that guide, what page in that guide, what formula, and what the degree of impairment rating is. And then it's got to be in a table. The insurers and the adjusters don't have to read radiology reports, MRI reports. You've got to take the information, put it into your medical file in the area called triggering factor, and then you've got to convert it into an impairment, show that the AMA guide was used, which chapter, which table, which edition, which page, which formula, and then it will be added as value. So it's very difficult to deal in an insurance environment unless you've got some sort of a record system that has a chance at exchanging the sufficient data required, the complexity of the data required, and the ability to interface and input added value. So let's just take a look at Zeus right now. I'm going to pull up a patient. I'll click SAM for a sample, and then I'll just pick a sample. Let's go with Frank the sample. So I'm bringing up the record, and I'm going to show you a little bit of how Zeus works. Okay. First, I want you to know you can email duties under duress, loss of enjoyment, and complaints to your personal injury patient even before they arrive. They can fill it out online, and then they click a button, and all that information will automatically populate into your record system for the injury patient. Or you can have them fill it out when they come into your office, give them a tablet, have them fill it out in the waiting room, or print it out and have them fill it out and then enter it yourself. But our clients wanted it to be simple, so we made an email opportunity for you to email. Your patients can fill out all their symptoms, complaints, duties under duress, and loss of enjoyment. Let's now take a look at the SOAP note input form, which has now been called the triggering factor data gathering. All right, so just want to point out to you some of the differences. Look at what it says here. It says, I have not provided care for this patient. I have reviewed the findings for the purpose of evaluating the history, the physical exam, the prognosis, and future care requirements. And I conducted a 1191M impairment rating by the attending physician, 1 to 3 body parts, to provide an independent medical validation of any existing impairments, to present the preponderance of the evidence, to establish the veracity of the injuries and their effects upon the individual and functioning. So I want you to understand something. You're going to be positioned in your community as the doctor who can see a client from an attorney that has already had a low valuation. And the attorney can send that client to you once, and you can perform the Zeus exam one time. Then the attorney will resubmit your findings. All those findings that were missing from the initial evaluation done by an electronic health record will now be upgraded. The complex data will be discovered. You'll use the computer-aided decision-making to make hundreds of decisions. I'll show you how that works. And the adjusters now have all that new information to input added value to return a new verdict, a new settlement, and suddenly you're going to be the one that can take lowball cases and convert them into fair settlements by using Zeus, because you're assembling all the trauma lines, all the injury severity points, all the decision points, all the case maximizers, all the prolonged modifier, all the 67,880 decision points and value drivers, of which 80% have been missing in your standard guides, will now be detected, and you can see the patient one time for the purpose of evaluating them. Just like when an attorney would like to have one of his clients have a disability determination, he must send them to a doctor that specializes in disability evaluation. Well, now they're going to understand. They've got to send their client to a doctor that's certified in exchanging data into Colossus. So now you've got a core competence, a unique selling proposition that others don't have in your community. I'm going to go on and show you that we're highly interested in the AOMSI injury. And that injury carries a $66,000 case settlement valuation. If you discover it, the Zeus software is going to give you the language and the exhibits the attorney needs to get the adjusters to pay at that value. What we're going to do is we use the injury calculator that Colossus uses, and when you're done assembling your case, Zeus is going to tell you the dollar value that Colossus is going to rate the injuries at. So the attorney has knowledge going in what this claim is worth. Now you're going to see different language here. Let's read one of them. The patient reported the collision impact was from the side, predisposing them to fractures of spine, vertebral, bony elements. Or, look at this one. The patient reported looking into the inside rearview mirror at the time of the impact, predisposing to fractures of the spine, bony element. You may not realize, but the derangement fracture occurs to the upward lateral projection of the vertebrae, usually C4, that's the uncinate process. That will fracture when the oblique forces are entered into the cervical spine. Anyone hit from the side, that's an obvious oblique insult. But if you're hit from the rear and your head is turned. Now we've got the research and the exhibits that say if your head was turned 37 degrees, there's a 50% probability that you will fracture the uncinate process. That's the upward lateral projection, usually at C4. If your head was rotated more than 60 degrees, then you go on to have almost a 100% chance of fracture. That fracture is overlooked. Number one, we're not asking the patients if their head was turned or if the injury forces were oblique. We're missing that. Number two, it takes 2 months for that injury to show up. And so most x-rays are taken at the time of the accident. That's why even the emergency rooms miss this fracture. And you have to tilt the x-ray tube up 35 degrees, move the tube in 10 inches, and drop it down to about the level of the knees to shoot 35 degrees cephalad in order to see that fracture. That's why we've got our recorded webinars. We also have tool tips in Zeus. If you go up to the top, we've got a help screen up here. We've also got a question mark thing. You click that question mark and you could go to any topic and Zeus will walk you through with a written tutorial. If you want to know about the uncinate process, click on uncinate process. It'll give you a tutorial. If you want to know whether your patient's got a physical concussion, whether they've got a behavioral concussion, an emotional concussion, a somatic concussion, if they have a concussion versus a contusion, you click on it. The help function will give you the tutorial. There is an online clinical manual. There is a help desk where you can pick by topic the help that you need, the time frame and the priority of which you want your help, a detailed explanation to submit. You'll have access to our recorded webinars, our clinical manuals, our help desk, our screen walkthrough, and you can hold the mouse over certain words that you may not understand, and then the tool tips will pop up and explain everything to you. Now I'm going to give you a fast walkthrough here, starting with body parts that are involved. You do not use a generic MMI. You do not use a generic prognosis. You must have an MMI for every body part. You must have a different prognosis for every body part. And it makes sense. If you strain or sprain your ankle on the brake, bruise your shoulder against the door of a car, and herniated disc, those are three distinct injuries which require three separate MMIs, which require three separate prognoses. In addition, Colossus wants to know which conditions are static, which are stable. They want you to determine the prognosis, not based by good, bad, poor, fair, poor, clinically unstable, but the prognosis must be a degree of reasonable medical probability on a range from 0 to 100 for each injury. What is the degree of reasonable medical probability that the ligament tear is going to become stable? And Colossus will give that injury 2 years to stabilize. They will actually allow treatment of an AOMSI for 2 years. So when you make a prognosis for AOMSI, it's going to have its own standalone MMI, which is going to take about 2 years. The prognosis is going to be that it's got a 76 to 100% medical certainty of occurring for a 2-year period. So here, we're going to identify what part of the body was involved. I had a mild traumatic brain injury, so I'm going to list the head. My neck was involved. I had AOMSI and disc hernia. I had TMJ. I had a shoulder bruise. I had a wrist sprain from the steering wheel. Whatever you had, just click it. But later, Zeus is going to prompt you to assign an MMI for each one, a prognosis for each one, the degree of reasonable medical probability from 0 to 100 as to whether or not it's going to become stable in what time frame. No more generic prognosis, no more generic MMI, no more good, bad, poor, fair, guarded, clinically unstable. It's now the degree of reasonable medical probability that this injury will become stable within this time frame, and the probability for future care based on 5 injury severity types, based on the 5 trauma line. I realize you don't understand all of this. That's why you'll be on our tutorials, but most importantly, you click the computer-aided decision button, and Zeus will make all these decisions for you. When it comes to diagnoses, we start with the concussions. Now, let me give you an example. You could have a cognitive, somatic, psychological concussion. You could have a contusion and a concussion. Contusions are localized. Concussions are widespread. You could have a physical concussion, behavioral concussion, emotional concussion, cognitive, somatic, psychological. You could have a cerebral contusion. Here's the diagnoses. I'm going to eliminate the diagnoses. I'm going to remove all of this, okay? Now, I took away a lot of those diagnoses, and I removed these diagnoses. Now, I want to show you something. We're going to go down to the post-traumatic concussion questionnaire, a series of questions your patients will be asked, okay? Regarding a cerebral contusion, these items in pink help us to determine if there's a presence of a contusion. Is there disorientation, unsteadiness while walking, vomiting, slurred speech, so on and so forth? In blue, it's going to represent physical concussions. In purple, it's going to represent cognitive, somatic, psychological concussions. In green, it's going to represent behavioral and emotional concussions. Let's go click off a few of these things now. So let's click off here. We got 2 in cerebral contusion. I'll pick a few for physical. We've got a few for cognitive, somatic, and a couple for behavioral. Now, let me go to the function known as computer-aided decision-making, and I'll show you what happens. We're clicking on computer-aided decision-making. The software is going to make decisions. These are the decisions it just made about the concussion. This is multi-criteria medical decision-making. It'll compile and organize all of the medical decision points, the value drivers, all the factors, translating this data into the diagnoses, the impairment, the DRE category, the DBI category, the specific disorder of the spine. It'll rate a spine impairment summary, whole person impairment, and it'll do it all automatically. Now let's go back and look at the record. And you should see that those diagnoses, look at that, the diagnoses have been entered. See all those buttons? The computer checked off all those things that I erased. So whatever the injury is, the software will help you to determine its presence, and then it will determine if there's enough reference to the AMA guide by citing the AMA guide chapter, table, page, formula, degree of impairment, placing it in the table format, putting it in the body of your medical records. These are just some of the things that Zeus is going to be able to do for you, okay? Zeus is going to help you identify the discs and whether or not there's pressure in the thecosacrospinal cord. It will help you determine the presence of contusions. You know, if you're going to have a muscle injury or a nerve injury or a ligament injury or a bone injury or a disc injury, you have to have damage to the dense connective tissue and collagen tissue. So the word contusion's got to be in your presentation. If you have any form of strain or sprain, you must immobilize it. Wrap it, strap it, tape it, brace it, compress it. Zeus is going to help you to do all of these factors so you don't lose value in the claim. So imagine a defense attorney saying to you, Dr. Liberti, I noticed that you gave this patient a diagnosis of a sprain in the neck, but you didn't immobilize it. You didn't wrap it, strap it, tape it, brace it, put him in a collar. I guess the strain wasn't that significant, was it? Or they'll say, Dr. Liberti said that there was a ligament tear, but there was no dense connective tissue or collagen tissue damage. How can that be? And so Colossus will start taking points off of you if you don't paint the picture clearly for them. So in order to prevent that, Zeus makes these decisions for you. And it literally, what can I say? It's a scrubbing software. After you're done. Now, here's a little section on the acute stress disorders. If you're unfamiliar with what constitutes a stress disorder impairment according to AMA guide, click on our tutorial. Go to the on-screen walkthrough, go to the clinical manual, or click the computer-aided decision button, and Zeus will make the diagnosis for you, listing what edition, chapter, table, page, formula of the guides, and put it in the table format. Here, look at some of these diagnoses. The disorder of the autonomic nervous system. The superior, middle, and lower stellate ganglions, the three ganglions, are located laterally and anteriorly into the muscles in the neck. There are actually 13 ligaments and 7 muscles, and when several of those muscles are injured, it'll cause a disorder of the autonomic nervous system. People will exhibit strange symptoms like difficulty hearing, visual discomfort. There's a difference between whether they see spots in their eyes that are black and white or colored. They may have problems initiating certain words, difficulty beginning to swallow. You'll notice patients are going to have certain things you never noticed before, like a particular type of pain on one side of their face. You'll be coming up. So Zeus is going to walk you through all of the gamut of concomitant injuries that you could experience from an impact collision. And we can't get into all that right now. This is not meant to be an educational seminar. It's meant to show you what Zeus is and how it's different. We do have seminars and trainings and online program. Radiculopathy is next, and it's very heavily rated in the 5th and 6th edition guide. Colossus will accept an impairment rating for sensory abnormalities, irregular deep tendon reflexes, muscle weakness, and motor weakness if you use 2-point discriminator, monofilament, NCV, EMG, or electronic muscle tester, but it won't rate a pinwheel. So we're showing grams of weight, and we instruct our doctors into how to acquire the monofilaments for $52 and perform monofilament testing so it can be rated and given an impairment rating according to the AMA guides, who actually prescribe monofilaments as the choice. And so you'll be able to learn a lot from us. Here's our muscle impairment grade. Here's our deep tendon reflex grade. Here are a host of spinal compression tests. Here are some specific disorders of the spine. Let me go ahead and show you something pretty intense now. I like to sometimes show this, although it is kind of intense. Let me show you what Zeus has the capacity to do for you. All right, watch this. I'm scrolling down. I'm sorry for the speed. All right, now watch. Specific disorders of the spine from Table 15-7 in the 5th edition guide on page 404 include vertebral body compression fractures, disc bulge, disc hernia, stenosis, spondylosis, spondylolisthesis. There's the fracture of the articular process, and there's alteration of motion segment integrity. But it will take every one of these body parts that were involved. It will list them. It will list the AMA guide by edition, chapter, table, page. It will cite the formula. It will list the degree of impairment for all the applicable injuries, and it will do it automatically. The next section gives your patient the opportunity to speak about their pain and their complaints. If you'll notice, it asks for an intensity, a frequency, a type of pain, radiation of the pain, and further effects on the pain affecting the body. And every time you answer and add to it, it pays more money. So it's good to instruct your patient to be as thorough as they can about the description qualifying modifiers that add value to the claim. Now I want to show you something else on duties under duress, and loss of enjoyment. These are all symptoms and complaints that you could expect in an auto accident. I know you're not aware of this, but there's an impairment called sleep disorder. I actually attended a seminar last weekend produced by the National Traffic Highway and Safety Administration, and one of their topics was on sleep disorders. And they recognize that neck injuries can involve one of three cranial nerves. One of those cranial nerves is related to your ability to be woken up during the night by pain that prevents sleep. And if that pain spills over into daytime function and activity, causing interpersonal relationship problems, causing you to be irritable or slowed on your job or less productive or maybe not able to make decisions, the AMA will allow you to rate it as an impairment if it fits the qualifiers. So Zeus is going to ask a series of questions to determine if your patients actually have this sleep disorder. And the National Highway Traffic Administration published 62% of people that have whiplash injuries, called whiplash-associated disorders, 62% will wind up with a sleep disorder that converts into an impairment. And that's not my finding. That's not Zeus or Colossus finding. That's the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. So we're going to look at every impairment that you could possibly find, including the subclinical anxieties, post-traumatic stress disorders. Now, look at this. This I find extremely. So Zeus is going to ask, do you have problems with stability, mobility, postural requirements, or dexterity? Why does Colossus, this is what Colossus will pay. They will pay in a duty under duress, they will pay for an person experiencing difficulty with stability or mobility, postural requirements, or dexterity. When you see people that have problems with this, they can't stand for a long period of time, or they become unstable while they're performing a function or standing. Maybe they are disturbed in their balance or their posture or their ability to touch, tactile sensation, dexterity, perform functions with the hand. Why does Colossus ask if this is experienced by the patient? And the reason is because when you injure the cervical ganglion by hyperextension that is strong enough to injure a muscle, the ganglion within the muscles are going to suffer autonomic nervous system damage, and it's going to go directly to the balance centers and the visual centers, causing problems with stability, mobility, posture requirements, balance, vision, and dexterity. So we're going to teach you which complex in the ganglion and which muscles, how to detect it. There's a questionnaire to help detect if ganglions have been involved. There are going to be the involvement of cervical nerves, cranial nerves, and cervical nerve roots. And there are going to be things that are going to affect those ganglion, a different set and a different type of injury and pain and symptoms. So we're going to be looking for AOMSI symptoms, mild traumatic brain injury symptoms, ganglion and nerve root injury symptoms. There's about 5 concomitant injuries that we're going to look at and how to determine the difference between them. I don't know if you're familiar, but I know we do lines of mensuration and we look for ligament laxity, but on some occasions, C2 will migrate back and up, and there's a line of mensuration for that. Zeus is going to help you to detect if C2 migrates. There's going to be instances where the hyperextension is going to involve concussions, mild traumatic brain injuries, injuries to the cranial nerves, damage to the muscles, the ganglion, and the vertebral basilar arteries, especially during rotation. And there's a vertebral basilar artery test you'll be required and prompted to do. There's so much here for you in terms of clinical and core competence, and we're focusing on personal injury, not just clinical injuries, but on documentation and on representation. Now look, I could go on through this tutorial here. There's loss of enjoyment. Then you simply just show what treatment you're providing. And now you've got to make prescriptions. Here's a list of the prescriptions you could make. You must refer Here's a list of things and places and people you can refer to. And you must prescribe immobility, even if you just use kinesio tape and wrap. But if you don't, Colossus will deduct upwards of 20% of the claim for not making a prescription, for not prescribing an immobility device, for not making a referral. You're going to have to determine what the stability overall is, the condition based. If you hold the mouse over there, the software will give you some kind of indicators as to how to determine stability, or Zeus will make it for you. You've got to medically determine 4 categories of the need for future care. A 25% uncertain possibility, 26 to 50% possible, 51 to 75% probable, or 76 to 100% definite. And this is going to involve everything: your strains, your sprains, your disc bulges, your disc hernias, your AOMSI, your sleep disorders. What are the determinations medically for future care? This is going to be based on what injury severity type they are in. Zeus will make the decisions for you. Yes, you're going to make a prognosis overall, but you're also going to make a prognosis for every different body part. I don't know if you're familiar with Karnofsky, but Oswestry measures pain, and Colossus is not concerned with pain. They want to know how you can measure lost performance or lost function. So to score the function, they use Karnofsky. Let me give you an example. When we did duties under duress and loss of enjoyment, if the patient was unable to mow the lawn, take out the garbage, walk the dog, then they can perform care for most needs, but they require assistance. Someone else has to mow the lawn, walk the dog, take out the garbage. That's a score of a 60. Now, you want to write a medically prescribed restriction. If they cannot walk the dog, take out the garbage, or mow the lawn, and they impose that on themselves, then you've got to write up. So we've got a written prescription for medical restrictions that's part of Zeus. Sometimes people have so many complaints it's not believable, so we ask you to have them fill out a witness statement form, all part of Zeus. Go to their teammates and say they haven't been coming to the bowling team, or to go to their employer saying that they've slowed down their performance, or go to the friends and say, I've had to walk the dog. Then there's the prognosis. Now, when you give a prognosis, it's going to be one of 4 factors. It's either going to be uncertain, possible, probable, or definite. You're going to have to know what it is for each one, and Zeus will help you to determine the prognosis for each body part. And then you've got to make a future treatment plan. And here are the different types of treatment plans you can make. And so if you're not familiar with that, Zeus will automatically help you, and you'll learn it on our tutorial. Okay. You've got to list future care. How many times, how much you're going to charge. Zeus can help you make that determination. And then you've got to come up with the MMI for each body part. If you remember, I said we had AOMSI in the neck, and that's going to be stable. But I had a sprain in my, my ankle when I jammed on the brake, and that got better, so it's static. So MMIs are going to be in part based on whether they're static or stable. They're going to have a degree of reasonable medical probability. They're going to have a future care requirement. Now we get into impairment rating. This cites the DRE category, and here's the range of motion category. Zeus will do this for you automatically. And then you're going to make some evidentiary conclusions. And sometimes we cite case law so that we establish the preponderance. Now, when you're done with all of this, click it, and you can produce your actual report of triggering factors. This will produce right onto your letterhead. There are no longer narrative requirements. Narratives are no longer admissible. Only triggering factors from your medical records. So this is what your triggering factor report will look like. Clinical evaluation, the diagnoses, the radiculopathy, spinal compression test, the specific disorders, the diagnoses, the complaints, the duties under duress, the loss of enjoyment, the treatment, prescriptions, referrals, and mobility devices, stability of the condition, medical determination of future treatment, overall prognosis. Look at all those prognoses being rendered. Then there's the individual prognosis for each of the areas involved, the future treatment plan, cost for future care, the MMI, the degree of impairment rating, the whole person impairment rating, and your evidentiary conclusions. Now let me show you another wonderful feature of Zeus. When you're done, what you're going to do, you're going to click a button and you're going to send all your records to a storage unit in the cloud, and the access code goes to the attorney. And when the attorney pulls up, your medical records will be right there, just like this. Your whole file, everything you did is going to be there for that attorney. Everything is going to be there in the right language, in the right format, and in the right sequence. The attorney can then, he does not have to ask you for medical records. He doesn't have to dictate, transcribe. He doesn't have to read. He just clicks a button. All your records will be there in the right language, format, and sequence. And if he wants to, he can click this button and enter the administrative, legal, and economic factors into the claim, because the medical factors will already be listed. Now he gets to put in the liability. What did the accident report say? What did the investigating officer say? What was the property damage? What were the overall medical expenses? What was the income loss? What were the mileage costs? What was the future medical expenses? What's the total for all the economic losses? And what are the evidentiary conclusions? And Zeus is going to make some of these conclusions for the attorney. For example, one of them says that AMA states the AOMSI has a 25% whole person impairment rating. The same whole person impairment rating is amputation of a foot and considered as severe as 2 vertebrae requiring spinal surgical fusion. The AMA guide says AOMSI is a rare occasion without severe trauma. It goes on to cite all about AOMSI. According to a former superintendent of insurance at Allstate, James Mathis, a diagnosis of AOMSI carries a case settlement reserve value of $66,000. The AMA says AOMSI is an objective medical finding based not on opinion but on mathematical modeling. It identifies it as ligament damage greater than 3.5 millimeters of tear, causing a loss of integrity resulting in functional instability of the spine, traumatically induced. All this language will be populated for the attorney. And then when it comes to the demand for settlement, over here, the software will tell the attorney exactly what the claim is worth based on the Colossus injury calculator. Now the attorney is going to know, well, this is what Colossus is going to determine the value of the range to be. And then he'll be able to tell if they discount that range. Now the attorney can just click this button. All your findings are sent to him. He doesn't have to bother you. Narratives are inadmissible, so you're wasting your time with them. Just let him have your notes, and here's what's going to happen. The attorney will now have this demand letter. His logo and letterhead will appear at the top. This is his demand letter. All that's already done for him. Here's your diagnoses. Here's your radiculopathy. Here's the spinal compression test, some specific disorders. Notice the impairment rating in section 3D is put into the table format for each of the body parts involved by AMA guide, chapter, table, page, establishing the impairment, the loss of function, referencing to the guides. That's all done for the attorney. This is all your findings. The attorney's guy, he doesn't have to transcribe or dictate or type or do anything. This is automatically done for him. He's going to love working with you. In the beginning is the medical components. All injury claims are going to be based upon medical, administrative, legal, and economic factors. When the impairment rating itself commands a 25% value of the entire medical claim, so you're going to have the best impairment rating, citing tables and chapters of the guides. This is all your findings already compiled for the attorney. Now here's his sections: liability, property damage, medical expenses, income loss, mileage cost, future medical, total of all economics. And there's the conclusion. And there's the demand. You are providing the attorney with everything required. No one else is going to be doing that for him, and you will be missing absolutely nothing. Lastly, you can make a few $100s by sending your file out to an independent third party to put a stamp on it and validate it. It's called independent medical validation. You'll have to get a copy and read this. But the courts, have created a system that will give one medical evaluator the preponderance of evidence and the greater weight over the other. That process is not IME, it's IMV, independent medical validation. This process contains notice of memorandum of point, statements of undisputed fact, declarations, and court authorities. It will cite evidentiary burdens of proof of regulatory requirements, declarations, the preponderance, the memorandum of points, the authorities, and it will give you a red stamp on 26 areas of your medical records that the adjusters can no longer dispute and deny. And look at Section 3C, specific disorders. Look at Section 3D. It continues on this page. This will put all of your findings into the table format, making it very difficult for an attorney, for an adjuster or an IME to dispute or to deny your actual claim. I am extremely satisfied with the results that we've enabled our personal injury clients to obtain with this extremely effective and affordable system. Now, Tony is making this available through the PI Doctors Elite community to you, waiving the setup fee and making this available to you. It's only $99 a month, and there's no contract, so it's like a perpetual trial. And the best way to learn it is just to get it and start in-plugging patient data. You will be invited to have access to our weekly webinars for Zeus members. You will have access to all the online tutorials and webinar tutorials. You'll have access to the tooltips. You'll have access to the help desk. You'll have access to the online clinical manual. You'll be able to submit requests for any information or data you need. You'll be invited to attend our live trainings where we always have workshops. And you will also have an opportunity to look at some of the educational tools and the exhibits that you'll be able to offer attorneys to help them make the case, make the point when they are presenting this evidence. There's a lot of tools, a lot of help. This is the personal injury system. For Nexus, Lexus, and Westlaw to tell me that they've never seen anything like it have exceeded my expectations of creating a masterpiece, because almost every attorney uses them as their source for their research and their demands and the way they operate their business. And so they're thinking of licensing this to the legal profession. But right now, you'll be able to send your record to the attorneys through the cloud for him to access the demand if he so, is inclined, saving them 50% of their time, but establishing and accumulating all these factors, decision points, value drivers that are not in your standard records. So you use Zeus initially and at discharge, and I know you're going to be very impressed. Then we're going to show you how to increase your visibility and momentum and general overall respect within your medical legal community, because you are going to have core competence that others don't have, are not likely to get, and they're going to be so strong, truly, that if attorneys don't use you, they are going to lose out. The first thing is for you to get it and bring this core competence into your practice. I just want to thank you for being on the presentation, and I hope to see you on our weekly shows if you register for Zeus. And I'm going to let Tony say goodbye to you, and I'll say goodbye now. Thank you for being here. Go ahead, Tony.
Dr. Frank, thanks so much for the time you take for our PI Doctors Elite community. Doctors, thanks for joining us this afternoon. We will post that link for our specific link for our offer to get that PI software. You saw it. It's very well organized. It looks like you just kind of systematically put the evaluations in on the first and last visit, compatible with your EHR. And we got a great situation going with Dr. Liberti's software. And I'm going to say probably to the end of July, we're going to try to get all our members on this as a special situation. So thank you so much again, and we wish you the best. We'll see you on the PI Community Elite hosting. Thanks for all the doctors who do share on that website. And Frank, I bid you a best afternoon there in Tampa, Florida, I believe. So thank you so much.
Yeah, good seeing you again, Tony. Thank you to you and your community.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Take care now. Bye-bye.